All right, well, thank you all for coming this afternoon. It's a busy time of semester, and we've got quite a few people on Zoom, so that's good. Can you all hear me? That microphone's working? Yes?
That microphone is the camera.
That microphone is the camera. This one is working.
Yes.
Very good. So, welcome to our latest Cosmo invited presentation for the semester. And I'm honored to introduce Professor Shirley Strum. Shirley is Professor of Anthropology at the University of California, San Diego. Shirley has studied wild baboons in Kenya for over 50 years. Her work has shed new light on the role of male aggression and dominance in baboon society, the importance of social intelligence and the social sophistication of baboon society, and insights from baboons in understanding human evolution. Her work on baboons has included projects on human-baboon coexistence and community-based conservation. She's author of the book, Almost Human. Did I miss? Baboons Almost Human. Yes, my apologies. And her work has been featured in numerous documentaries, including National Geographic. And before I hand over to Shirley to start talking, I would like to extend a special welcome to Ted Goslow, who's sitting there. Ted was Marcio Legis' professor back in the day, and he inspired her so much, and that here at NAU, that together with that inspiration, Marcio Legis created the Legis Goslow Chair, and her kind donation to NAU enables events like this one. And also I'd like to extend a special welcome to our new Dean, who started a few months ago, Roger Harrow, the Dean of our College of Environment, Forestry and Natural Sciences. And then also I would like to acknowledge Jenna Keeney, sitting over there with the camera, who's done a tremendous job helping coordinate things and prepare, and Emily Wren, who's helping us manage the Zoom over there. All right, and Laura Schmidt, who's not here, who helped book the room and do some background work. So we have some catering in the back there, as you can see, so we can all have a chat and talk more about baboons. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Shirley, and there'll be an opportunity for questions and discussion afterwards.
Thank you, Juan. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, great. As Juan said, I'm actually retired except for teaching. I'm a professor of the Graduate Division of the School of Social Sciences and in the Department of Anthropology. And I've been studying baboons for 50 years, which makes me really weird. So, having said that I was weird, we can go from there. And the topic for today is baboons, the monkey that people love and hate. And I got interested in the role of the media because when I started, everyone loved baboons, and now everyone hates baboons. And my journey through those 50 years allows me to think about what role the media has played in this shift.
Sorry, we're just having some sound issues on the Zoom, so sorry to interrupt. Let's see. They can't hear the microphone.
The microphone is here.
Okay.
My apologies. This is why we should have got Nicole more excited about the baboons. Something so she could help us fix this.
Let's try that one.
Okay.
Maybe we got the Zoom.
That looks better.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Jenna. You're struggling to hear at the back there. So Shirley, when we went through this, maybe we can move the speaker and you can speak more loudly, like you're trying to chase the baboon out of your kitchen.
I was left to go to the beginning.
You wouldn't? Well, sometimes one doesn't have a choice when it comes to baboons.
Alright.
You come through a lot louder. You're very loud right here.
It's, I think, the way the microphone catches different voices.
Yes.
Now, whatever you've done, Jenna,
Yeah.
whatever you've done has made it impossible for me to move between slides.
Oh, jeepers. So, can you do it there?
Maybe we should.
Oh, there we go, just use
I
that.
can do
That's
that.
okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yep.
All right,
Sorry about that, Shirley.
that's okay. So just a little bit of background. In the 50 years, there's been 2 locations with the same baboons. The first one was in the Great Rift Valley on a private cattle ranch that had more wildlife than cattle. And then after translocation on the eastern part of the Montana Plateau, where because one group kept splitting and splitting and splitting, we were studying more than 8 groups at one time, and now only studying one group. So because I can't take you to the baboons, I want to just show you a little snippet. Sorry. One of the key points of this, in addition to introducing you a little bit to wild baboons, is that to interpret what you were seeing would take you a long time. It took me a long time, but it would require knowing what is going on off camera, and that's not where my camera was pointed. So this is grooming. It's the basis of all primate social bonds. It's the reason why we humans like massage or being touched. It started as a hygienic function, which then got co-opted to the social realm, and it's the basis of how relationships get established and maintained. This is something I would call good grooming, as opposed to bad grooming. Here, the animal who's doing the grooming is carefully parting the hair and looking for pieces of debris and insects. And trappers always say that baboons and other primates are the cleanest of all the animals, of all the wildlife that we trap. Okay, so I need to, I can't do 50 years of research in this short period of time, but what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about why I went in the first place and then what I found. And so I went to test what was called the baboon model of human evolution. And at the time, the forest is the habitat for primates, and very few experiments onto the open savanna, competing with large herbivores who are well adapted and larger predators than you have in the forest without the safety of the trees. Most of those experiments have failed, but baboons and humans have been extremely successful. And one of the reasons I wanted to see whether this was, the baboon model was correct, was that we were using it for interpretations of early humans. Now, what was the baboon model? It was a male-based model. Only males were identified, which made sense at the time. Males had a dominance hierarchy. That was the structure of the group. They were the leaders, the policers, the enforcers, and everyone's attention was focused on them. And they were studied the most of any species in the early 1970s. Most species hadn't been studied, and the ones who had only been studied at one site. But baboons had been studied at 3 places, 2 in Kenya and 1 in southern Africa. And when the scientists brought their information together, they were really impressed by the similarities across. There were different species. They were all baboons, but they were different species. They were in different locations. And they felt that this was a way, that there was a uniformity across baboons that spoke to what it was on the savannah that would pose the challenges for a puny primate leaving the safety of the trees. It was also one of the few cases where there was some evolutionary link between the anatomy and the behavior. Baboon males with their large canines, their bigger size, their large mantle of hair, were built as fighting machines. And you could see some of that in their behavior. So while people were trying to make evolutionary explanations of behavior and anatomy, this baboon model was one of the few cases, and that's where you could see this, and that's what made everyone excited. So instead, what I saw was totally different from what had been described. There was very little male aggression. The male dominance hierarchy was extremely dynamic, and males who I thought were leaving an aggressive encounter were actually going off to get what we now call an agonistic buffer. And that could be a female or an infant that they could come back to face their opponent, and that turned off the aggression. So why did it work? Can you hear me?
I think there's just the button. I believe I do. Oh, it doesn't show here.
No.
I have no idea. See if you can. Doesn't. It's already gone.
Fixed.
Oh,
Thank you.
well, thank you. Trick.
Okay.
Let's hope it doesn't happen again. Thank you so much.
So why did using a buffer work? Well, in baboon society, the other members, the troop, does not defend adult males, but they do defend infants and females. So that was a way to mobilize the rest of the troop on your behalf. The trouble is that to make it work, you had to make sure that the animal you took as your buffer trusted you and screamed at your opponent if he continued his aggression. If, unfortunately, the buffer screamed at you, then you would be the target of the troop's aggression. And so this worked in that way, in a very complex way, but it also depended on the establishment of relationships between males and females and males and infants in advance of the whole use of a buffer. So isn't that a cute black baby? And aren't these baboons beautiful? So what I learned in this first chunk of time was that baboons were not as they had been described. Males were built for fighting, but they had other options. And you have to understand that although baboons don't kill each other, an injury as a result of aggression could really impair your ability to keep up with the group, to mate, to do all the basic activities that you're supposed to do. So having an alternative to aggression is always preferable, but you first need to have some experience, you need to have intelligence, you need to have relationships. So males built as fighting machines had other options which they took, and I called them social strategies of competition and defense. But females who were half the size also had power and influence. They too had a female hierarchy. And in fact, the irony is that a baboon group is matriarchal with female families lined up according to a rank. What I discovered was an incredible amount of social complexity, which has still been unmatched for non-human animals. There were friendships for collaboration, and it was clear that this kind of situation had to be done by an animal who had something up here. I know all of you, and especially those of you who have pets, think your animals have minds, and they do. But back then, scientists didn't think they had minds. They thought that all you needed was behavior. You didn't even have to talk about emotions. And that was off limits, basically, to think about a mind. Okay, I could talk about baboons for a long time, and I don't have that much time. So I want to switch to something that you already know, and that is that the world is changing fast. And this graph, I'm sure you've seen different versions of it, which shows the incredible explosion of the human population. And part of this had an impact on the baboons. I call baboons harbingers of the Anthropocene, the human age, because they experienced, and I experienced through them, all the problems that were going to happen as part of the crisis that we're in today. So I changed from being a pure academic testing scientific ideas to using my science to have some solutions for these applied things. Basically, could I stop these baboons from raiding? And that was, at this point, I was committed to the baboons. But to reduce this kind of conflict requires both science for understanding the problem and solutions for which would have involved people. And I tell my students that you can know everything there is to know about a species or an ecosystem and still not be able to save it, because as my husband, David Western, who developed community-based conservation, said, if people are part of the problem, then people have to be part of the solution. So the science part, understanding the problem, included looking at these naive animals as they were becoming crop raiders, testing old and new techniques for controlling them. And as a result, I learned that, contrary to what my colleagues were saying, that raiding was not aberrant, it was a good foraging strategy as long as the benefits outweighed the costs. And at this point in time, in this location, that was true. The benefits outweighed the costs. But I also realized that I had to invite and involve the people, and so I had Kenyan research assistants who acted as the cultural translators, and also working with the community. I have to admit that the farmers were really angry when the baboons attacked their fields. And baboons do a lot of damage, not as much as elephants do, but still, with their hands, they check to see if the maize cob is ripe. And if it isn't, they pass it off. But that plant is destroyed in any case. So working with the farmers, providing them with alternative sources of income to offset the loss of income that resulted from the baboon crop raiding, and helping them build a school meant that we established a way of coexisting between the baboons and the people. And in fact, the farmer who was the most vociferous said to me at the end that he'd rather have baboons and the benefits that the baboon project brought than not have baboons at all, which was saying something, I think. But baboons being baboons, they found the kitchen gardens of an army camp that was on the very edge of their home range. And then, being baboons, went into the kitchens of the married women, army women. And the army decided that I had to solve the problem, or they would, and there were a lot of baboon deaths. So even though we had coexistence with the farmers, we had conflict with the army. And so that led me to try another experiment, and that was translocating these 3 troops to a new place. I had a lot of problems convincing ranchers on the eastern part of the Laikipia Plateau that they should accept baboons, not only baboons, but accept me with them. It's sort of like I would say to you, I'd like to study, I want to bring some termites to your house. In addition, I would like to go live there and watch them as they destroy your house. But in the end, I found one rancher who was very positive, and it allowed me to move them. So the translocation itself was a big process, and it involved the Institute of Primate Research in Kenya. What did the baboons have to learn in this new place? Well, first of all, it was like climate change, but in one day or 1 week. They went from a place that had a lot of rainfall, a lot of food, to a place that was drier, more arid, more seasonal, more droughts. And basically, I could see from what the information I had that they only knew about half of the plants that they would need to eat in order to survive. And unfortunately, the plants that they needed in the droughts were the ones that they didn't know. So they needed to figure out where to sleep, what to eat, where to range, what to fear, and as well, how to fit into an indigenous baboon population. And that's a large story that I don't have time to talk about. Here too, just like with the crop raiding, I used my understanding of them to try and outsmart them, and I outsmarted them to capture them all, except one who was smarter than me. I managed to release them properly, and I outsmarted them to making them stay put. So in that case, I think my baboon knowledge really came in handy because people who capture baboons for biomedical research say that they never get more than 50% of any truth, because once the baboons on the first day get captured, none of the other baboons would go into the traps. So, over the years, and it's been many decades, I've had to deal with conflict between the baboons and humans. Now, I moved them to a place where crops couldn't be grown, but what I hadn't anticipated was that the baboons here took livestock, young goats, at the end of the dry season and during droughts. So there was still conflict, it just was a different kind of conflict. And this is where I was scrambling to just try whatever I could with the community-based conservation motto, which is if people are part of the problem, then people have to be part of the solution. So the Baboon Project helped with schools, many different kinds of schools, employed local people through schools and employees, raising the awareness about what needed to be done in order to protect private property from the baboons. And we made a deal. That is, people were obligated to protect their own property, their own herds, their own homesteads, in exchange for the Baboon Project helping the schools, employing local people, and trying to work on developing new enterprises. In 1996, which was probably before some of you were born, the women from this Maasai community came to me and asked if I could help with an idea they had, which is they wanted to build a manyatta, which is like a homestead, that would preserve Maasai traditions. And I thought that was a great idea. Soon they wanted to earn some income in addition to preserving Maasai traditions, although I have to say they purposely said not the traditions that hurt the girl child. So the trouble with generating income is that this wasn't on the tourist route. So we together developed ecotourism walks, that is walking with baboons. That's a separate baboon troop they got habituated for tourists. Walking with livestock and a medicinal plant walk. We also developed different products from an invasive cactus that took off from 2000 to present, and we tried to find outside markets where their wonderful bee work. We did cricket in the wild. Maasai cricket warriors actually have won some games, and there's a film on them that has won some prizes called Warrior. We employed trackers to warn houses, homesteads, and herds when the baboons were near, and this was really very important. And the result was that local attitudes changed, and we had a recipe for coexistence. Sorry. I want to switch once more to something else. I've been involved in 25 natural history documentaries over many decades. But it was only recently when I was invited to Cape Town in 2012 that I realized the extent of the problem between humans and baboons in Cape Town. And so that made me think about the role of the media in forming our attitudes about animals, but for me in particular about baboons. So the media is considered an extension of the human body, although now I think we have to say other animal bodies as well, because we're providing things for other animals that could be considered media. The controversy began back in the 1900s It continued with the introduction of the television. It became even worse when TVs became cheap enough that every household could have many, because when TVs were expensive, the whole family sat in front. And it wasn't quality time, but it was a time when they could talk to each other and at least negotiate about which program was going to be watched. But now, with a TV in every room, everyone could go and be isolated. Of course, there are different media for different generations. I'm from the boomers, so film and natural history documentaries are really my media. And of course, Gen X, Gen Y, millennials, and Gen Z all have different media consequences. Ooh. Sorry. Okay. So I think none of you know the story of the first Jane Goodall National Geographic special. Neither National Geographic nor Jane herself imagined the impact it would have on the audience. And that created a new genre of nature documentaries. It also created women as cultural icons, women in the wild. It inspired a lot of women to enter biology and anthropology. It also inspired a lot of people to take up conservation. But the downside was that it romanticized nature, and it excluded the people who have been living with nature and suffering the consequences of that. This became the National Geographic template, it became the Disney template, and sadly now, until very recently, it was the BBC template. And even David Attenborough admitted and had a change of heart in the last few years that he had been ignoring people. I decided I needed to be more in touch with Generation Z, and so I taught a course called Conservation in the Media Film Lab. And this course was totally experimental for me, and I, again, I'm not a media expert, but I've been involved in a lot of media productions. And what we did in the class was I picked film clips that I thought they would like, which they hated. I picked film clips that I hated, which they loved. And then they had to develop criteria for what would make a better conservation film or a more appealing film for them. Then they had to do research on a topic and present the storyboards, but not actually do the film to the rest of the class. And from that process, this is what I learned, and it was very surprising to me. So I think I learned as much from them as they learned from me, but I want to share it before I go on to the last few minutes about social media. The lessons that I learned were shocking to me, not now, because I've taught the course twice, but the first time I taught it, it was surprising. First of all, they don't like old white men as narrators. In fact, not even David Attenborough. In fact, they don't want white men at all. Not at all. They want diverse voices. They want voices from the community. They want authenticity. They don't like anything slick, not the BBC natural history documentaries. They want it rough, because they want to feel like they're there, and they feel that if they're there and it's rough, that they have emotional connection to it. What was interesting to me is that they saw environmental issues as being human issues, and this doesn't come across in any of the films that I've reviewed. They want a clear and convincing storyline. I think we all want that. but the length has to be short. Most nature documentaries are 50 to 60 minutes long. These kids won't sit through 50 or 60 minutes. They want something 5 or 10 minutes in length. They want it fast-paced. They want the visuals to be interesting, a lot more variety, more graphics, virtual reality if possible, different points of view. Music isn't essential, but if sounds are there, then they should be natural sounds. And the part that really stuck with me is that they wanted films to be focused on solutions and not the problems. It's interesting because in teaching a course for almost 3 decades called Conservation and the Human Predicament, I did a film festival in the evenings, and I tried to find films that had a few words at the end that were positive instead of negative, because the challenge is you don't want to make someone so depressed that they don't act at all, and yet you can't be Pollyanna and say everything's fine. They want it reversed. They want the throwaway lines about the problems and the whole film, well, the whole film, 10 minutes, about the solutions and what possible actions that they could take. Because they claim that today the audience, not just them, but older people as well, know what the problems are, what the issues are, and the real challenge is to know what the solutions are. They also felt that ethics were essential, and this really struck me. They want the film to include the impact on marginalized and local communities, human communities. I think I would add ecological communities as well. And they wanted to see an ethical connection to human rights, animal rights, and if possible, animal welfare. We had a big discussion about how animal welfare and animal conservation often are at opposite ends of the pole. And finally, they felt that these films should show their anger at having to be saddled with the problems that our generation and those before have created. So that is really, to me, a telling, it's the opposite of the films that we see. It's the total opposite. And I'm not an expert on film, but I think that they're right, that we need to change the way we approach things. I want to...
I think you need to press play.
No. I think I have to. She said I have to take it to here. Ooh.
The cursor,
Where's
the
the...
baboon stole it. So it's...
No, it won't work on that. I have to do it. There's something funny she did.
Oh, tell me.
Yes. Oh, no. Okay.
There we go.
There we go.
Baboons have found that humans are easy to eat. They don't seem to respect us. People are being raided by wild animals.
They literally are criminals on 4 legs. They're like gangsters.
It's illogical.
Oh, shit! Baboons are dangerous animals.
The Cape of Good Hope in South Africa is a majestic place, home to an abundance of wildlife.
Did you want it back or?
No, that's fine. That's
Great.
fine. Okay.
Yes, that's my upbringing.
Yes.
Exactly that.
And that's what is flooding social media.
Mm-hmm.
And despite all the discoveries that I have made about baboons and success in coexistence, The media is projecting a very different image.
Let me just go press escape and get this.
I need to go to
It is no. I know.
the.
So I think we need that expert. You need to.
I need to bring it back over here.
Oh,
Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. So I don't use social media. I'm certainly not an expert on it, but I like this slide. Not too long ago, people walked with their heads up, looking at the water, the sky, the sand, and at one another, talking. Now they often walk with their heads down, typing, even when they're with friends, partners, children. Everyone is on their own devices. And so social media has incredible new powers that the other media didn't have. And if any of you are interested in how this came about, Max Fisher's book, The Chaos Machine, is a great introduction. I just want to, again, I'm not an expert on social media, but I think it's important for us to understand what's unique about it. First of all, the algorithms that are being used create communities almost instantaneously. And they can be communities of hate, not just of other things. A real life community, a primate community, a human community takes work, connection, and time. So you've suddenly got the ability to create these communities almost instantaneously. In addition, information can spread just like that, and that's misinformation as well. So that virality, or however you describe it, is something totally new. Now, all media have a business model, but the business model of social media is pretty devastating. They're capturing your attention in order to sell ads. Now, I have to admit, I didn't understand this, because in Nairobi, when I go on my 3 or 4 newsletters, I see the newsletters. But when I came back to California, and I started looking at the newsletters, it was all ads. The newsletter head of type were just in between all these ads. So they want to keep you on as long as possible in order to sell the ads. And I even found myself thinking, oh, well, I've seen this like 10 times. Maybe I should buy it. They're also selling your personal information without any permission or without you getting any money. They're creating echo chambers, people who speak only to people who agree with them, who have the same worldview. Again, it's a distortion of what happens in normal social interactions. That happens normally, but this has put it into a pressure cooker. Now, I want to bring it down to something that affects me, and that is that the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, has developed some best practice guidelines, part of which refers to human-primate interaction. And what they're saying is that at the time when Jane Goodall was reaching out to touch a chimp, when Diane Fossey was touching a gorilla, when David Attenborough was touching a gorilla, there was the spread of those images was much more controlled, and it didn't feed into a whole set of bad human behaviors. Now, it's possible through the social media to use images like that have bad outcomes. For example, you see someone touching a primate, and you think, oh, well, maybe I should have a pet like That feeds into illegal trade. It also feeds into a lot of other bad human behaviors. It makes the not just the pet trade, but primate ecotourism makes people want to get close, to get to touch, which is not a good idea. So, expectations have changed over the 50 years I've been watching.
Are you looking for baboons? Listen, this is the bamboo forest. It's bamboo, baby. No, there's no baboons. It's bamboo. These trees are bamboo. We came to see the trees. There's no baboons. Okay? No, there's no baboons. You're just saying it wrong. Bamboo. It just sounds like the word bamboo. This is bamboo.
This is a brown infant who has been weaned from its mother's nipple and from easy access to her stomach. And he's facing a new reality. And I think we're facing a new reality. I think we're like this weaned infant. We need to find out how to use the media in order to fix the planet, in order to have respect for the other creatures that share the planet with us, in order to have community voices be heard. Ron and some other people did a fantastic paper on looking at what was said about elephants on Twitter, which showed how little is actually communicated on Twitter by people from the communities that live with elephants. So young people in Mukagoto, which is where the baboons are, have smartphones, and they're already connected. But the problem is they need a way to make a difference, and that's the challenge that I'm going to give you. No. There, okay. And I just want to thank the Baboons and a team that goes on because it's 50 years, well, 40 years for communities. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shirley, for that very wide-ranging talk that covered so much ground. I have many questions for you, and I wish I'd read more of your work when I was growing up with baboons. May have made it less antagonistic and more interesting. So, we have some time for questions. Any questions from the... Yes?
Sorry, me?
Yes, you.
Sorry. I just was curious as to the indigenous beliefs about baboons in the area, and if it's comparable to the way like native ranchers here will demonize coyotes based off of their traditions.
So for Maasai, it's said that in a drought, some clans actually gave their children to the baboons because they knew the baboons would survive the drought, and then took them back after the drought. So except for that, there really isn't much of a local indigenous set of ideas about baboons. It's more the day-to-day, the impact of the day-to-day interactions, which even for the Maasai, where the Baboon Project is helping with the school and all these other things, still, if you're the herder who owns a goat and that baby goat was eaten by a baboon, you get very, very mad. So it's less about traditional ideas about baboons and more about the lived experience for every day.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the video of the baboons running all over the houses and the cars and all of that kind of stuff. It looked like Nightmare on Elm Street. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are regarding when you've got so many of them that have been so successful thriving in, living in with human beings. What do you think regarding a solution? Do you feel culling is sometimes necessary? I mean, you certainly can't catch them and take them somewhere else because who would like them? Or do we just live with this insanity?
So, unfortunately, it's always a people problem and the animals pay the price. And in this case, it's really interesting in Cape Town. It's the animal welfare people who control the media and didn't. Cape Town as a city pays $1 million a year to hire baboon monitors who follow the baboons, but the only thing they were allowed to do was clap their hands.
I didn't see any in video.
And so what has happened is over the last 15 years, the baboons have developed a tradition of eating human food. Now, it's harder to stop a tradition or change a tradition than it would be to prevent it in the first place. On top of that, they have produced baboon-proof dustbins, garbage cans. I'm sorry, I was between English words and American words, the same thing. What happens? People don't use them properly, and so the baboons can go in, open them up, help themselves. I went to the Cape of Good Hope, and I was walking around looking at the baboons, and there were people there having a barbecue. And the baboons were coming, and I said to them, you know, the baboons are coming, you better be alert. They weren't. They were just drinking their beer. And so the baboons came up and took the meat, and then they got mad. So I don't really, I mean, Cape Town is an unusual situation in that there are communities that are very wealthy, and those communities have created baboon-proof fences around them, and that seems to be working really well. I convinced some people to use more, to up the cost, to try and counterbalance the benefits. So they're using paintball guns, which hurt but don't injure the baboons. They use thunder flashers, which are these big, loud things. They've tried a lot of different techniques, which have some effect to begin with. But you hit the nail on the head. You can't move those baboons anywhere else. However, they have been killing he males who are just criminals, basically. But the animal welfare people are on TV saying, and they're on the end of this video saying, oh, you have to love baboons, and we just have to learn to live with them. Well, you can't learn to live with them when they're like that. And I was very happy to get off the plane in Kenya and think, I don't have such bad situations.
Yes?
I was kind of interested in the logistics when you relocated the troops. Was this how long did it take? Was it a capture, transport, release, a hard release to the wild, or was there some intermediary training time, transition on foods?
Well, it was before anyone thought about a soft release. But what I did was to get the baboons habituated to the traps and let them tell me when they felt comfortable around them and then set them. So that was like a month for each troop. then they were captured. It was really funny because these were low-tech traps. We had a trap door with a string that went through and up through a platform that held a maze from the top. And so the baboons went in and plucked the maze, and then I thought, oh, they'll just freak out when the door slams. They didn't. They just sat there, ate the maze. Then the team from IPR was the ones that sedated them. They got taken to another location. They got a full medical workup, and then transported to the new site. So here I decided that I would keep the males captive because males tend to wander, but females won't go very far. So I was hoping that would work. So I kept the males captive, and the females got used to an area. And then I released the males, and I had hoped, but there was no plan B, that the females would act as a check on the males, and that's what happened. So it was not a soft release in any way. They weren't. It was the end of a really bad drought. The only thing that I did do was to give them young stock cubes just at the top of until the rains came. So no soft release, just a hard release.
Are there any questions on Zoom? No.
No. Just one comment. That's it. Just wanted to say how much they appreciate you connecting communication and social media to the larger picture of conservation.
Great, yes, and we actually have a little workshop tomorrow morning talking about that. Eric, question?
I'm just wondering, from a social media perspective, if you've seen really good use of social media in wildlife conservation, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I'm actually the wrong person to ask because I don't do social media at all. I finally got a Facebook page, but it's been 10 years since I did anything with it. So I think maybe Juan would be.
Yeah, we can talk more about that tomorrow morning. There are some small examples, but I think as you were referring to the algorithms and for mainstream media as well, the solution stuff doesn't sell as well as the bad news and the controversial
there's no
stories of catastrophe. So yeah, that is our challenge.
Yeah, there are no filters. That's the trouble on social media. There's no way to balance what people put on. Some just put stuff on because they want to do a prank.
Yeah.
Or they want to just argue, or we're trapped. When I first started teaching biology, which was further back than your 50 years, one of the themes that I always would mention is that primates are the most visual of all animals. And boy, did we get hooked. That's what's happened. And it's so obvious. We cannot walk into a room and try to have a conversation if somebody leaves the TV on. Doesn't matter what's on. Mm-hmm. We have to glance. We have to. Because it's part of our survival.
Yeah.
It's as basic as that. We had to know what was going on around us. And watching a small bird, you really see, they're always just checking everything out constantly because that's how they survive. And that's how primates survived as well, as all of us.
But I think the difference with social media and previous media is that there were always gatekeepers. This is what I was complaining about for film, that there were a few big companies who were the gatekeepers of what you were going to see. You weren't aware of that.
I agree.
Now there are no gatekeepers, and there's no way to tell the difference between a fact and fiction, unless you do a lot of work. And I think that that's really damaging.
It is, and here we are in Flagstaff. So many of us live here because of the terrain. We can get out, and then on TV, what are we seeing? All the truck manufacturers are saying, just drive anywhere, get away as far as you can. I mean, it drives all of us crazy.
Oh, there was a question there, Laura, and then I think we should wrap up and continue our discussions over all that food and drink.
Who gives every baboon a smartphone, and they get an app on there that's called Strum, and it shows them other baboons, and if they wouldn't want to groom that one, they sort of rush, and if the other groom they sort of like, and that's who the baboons are.
Well, so, I mean, Tinder for baboons. Interesting. GoPros for baboons. That must have been tried. You put a GoPro on a baboon and you live the world through their eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
Tinder for baboons, I think, would be next level.
Definitely next level, but my fantasy is that you could have not a cap to track the brain waves, but some remote thing that would allow you to get the brain images along with the behavior. So if you can figure out any way to do that, please talk to me.
Right, well, thank you, Shirley, once again. And thank you, everyone. Please join us for the food at the back there.